Hi, everybody. We did it. Look at that. You know what I didn't think about? You know what I thought? You know what I failed to think about is how we're going to respond to those messages, like those comments there.
We'll just have to address them live.
Yeah, which is fair.
Totally.
But
That's fair. We're too far away to type, so
like
we have to take verbal commentary.
Yeah. I mean, commentary is good. Okay, we did. So, hi everybody. This is an interesting, unique opportunity. We're in San Francisco. Somebody's got to be here. Why not us? Also,
well, you live here.
So you part time, right? And we're all like, I think all three of us have a claim to being a Bay Area people.
It's true. We're all local. We're all local in the Bay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And
but now we're not always all together.
Never. That's the serendipity here. That's so good. Friends of mine, right? Like, and now we're in the same place, and it's just been such a privilege. And you and I were fixing to talk because you, Heather.
Yes.
By the way, you should do.
Yeah,
you should introduce yourself so that I don't butcher it. Otherwise, I'll just grovel, which isn't great.
Okay, you first.
So I'm Rod Johnson. I guess I was the creator of Spring. Did Spring Source. Had the privilege of assembling like the most incredible group of people I've ever worked with at Spring, including Josh.
Hi.
So I think that it is a very, very special team, and that for me is one of the most meaningful things. For the last 10 years since I left VMware, I've done other things, principally investing, companies like Adamus, Neo4j, and Elastic. But I still write a ton of code in various languages.
11 years, it hurts me to say, since you left.
Yes.
Well, does the host have to introduce himself now?
Oh, they're
everyone knows the host.
They know about you.
Everyone knows the host.
They would rather I just stop showing up, but I'm sure they're here because of you. So now for the other guest, please.
Yes.
Heather
VanCura. Let's see. I've been involved with the Java community for over 20 years. And as Josh was just starting to allude to, I recently published a book about developer careers.
I'm going to talk about this. That's actually really the thrust of why we're all talking today. Like, there's a lot of conversations we could have with these two amazing people, but this book is, I think,
This was the impetus for us getting together because we were chatting about the book and careers, and we all seem to be interested in this topic.
And we have only in common that we love this thing.
We love Duke. We love Duke.
We love Java. So
yes.
That worked out well.
And and the book could apply really to any developer in any language, but almost all of the examples in the book are Java developers. So obviously near and dear to my heart.
Rod, do you still remember Java?
I still do. I must admit more recently for my sins, I've been writing predominantly in Python. I wish I was writing more in Java though. Yeah. I guess I've gotten very deep into the AI space. Yeah. And I think what we're going to see happening is as people build more and more apps that use LLMs and they integrate that with their app estate, I think you're going to see a lot more of those apps being Java. Yeah. I think you're already seeing it with like TypeScript really taking off in that space. I think it'll happen in Java. But obviously the default language of ML ops is Python. So I've been writing a lot of Python. I miss Java.
Yeah, for now, like you said, Java's right behind there and it's coming up. So
Java's growing by leaps and bounds, and if it's proven one thing, you should never count it out, right? It's always
definitely not. And
well, I mean, I think if you look at the kind of work that's going into the JVM, I think Java obviously has to strike a balance of being a mature language where you have to be very, very careful because of the installed base. So you can't be irresponsible. You can't, I don't know, don't take this the wrong way. You can't turn Java into Scala.
Hot takes.
Well, I mean, I have a soft spot for Scala as well.
You do.
I'm not necessarily betting on Scala, but they're just different things. So with Java, I actually think that it's worked surprisingly well under Oracle, and the balance is really pretty good in terms of moving the language forward while still keeping that enterprise solidity. And of course, it's not just the language, it's the programming model around it. And obviously that's something Spring is always awesome.
Right. And Spring's part of the ecosystem. And yeah, that's true. Security and stability is key with Java, but also balancing it with innovation. And what we've seen over the last 5 years is the pipeline for new features is richer than it's ever been.
Oh.
So yeah, it's definitely a balance, but security and stability, performance.
And if you're building business applications, I mean, I'm acutely aware of this at the moment because I'm essentially working in Python, trying to build kind of LLM-enabled apps.
Yeah.
The kind of functionality I want for building that kind of business app, it was better in Java years ago. It's like some of those problems are just solved in a much more sophisticated way in Java and the ecosystem.
Isn't that interesting? I think the things that make Python so great for the things for which it's sort of... Is there something you need? My phone? Yeah. What for?
Anyways, what are our comments here? Legends. Just ordered the book.
You won't regret it. It's a
Gunnar's
really good
in
book.
Hawaii, yes. So we were just saying when we started, we'll get
You
the.
knew Gunnar.
I do. That's why I pointed out.
But did you overlap with Gunnar? You must have.
I certainly
It must
am
have been
familiar with Gunnar. I don't
very
know
familiar.
if we overlap, but yeah.
I
Yeah.
know him.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Yeah,
But
so-
And Dan, I know. Yeah, all our friends are here. Dan's
of
making
friends.
lots of comments.
yeah, good to see everybody. Look at that. But, so Gunnar was on the Spring team for years. Now he's at Oracle, right? So it's actually
Oh, I didn't
all
even
the
know
family.
that.
Yeah, he's
I don't
just-
even know who works at Oracle, honestly,
Yeah.
sometimes,
All the
because to me,
family.
it's all the community, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're part of my family, too.
Oh, we're all. This is such a nice thing. We met briefly at Spring one many moons. Yeah, that would have been because I think Gunnar joined. It couldn't have been a year or two. Not even a year. It was probably around the same time as I did. And you left 2012. I joined 2010. So there was, I don't know, must have been some, I don't know, small world. Anyway, what is this? Nice next question.
2011, 6 months of experience with Java.
2011. Oh yeah, so you
Hard to get into junior positions these days. Any suggestions what to do? Same for internships.
Great question.
Yeah.
First of all, even I, a person who's not actively looking for a job, can't help but notice that there are no jobs. Like it's bad out there. So, does anybody have a solution for this? Because
Well, I mean, obviously, actually, a lot of things I talk about in the book. But I mean, obviously, you have to use your network. So hopefully you have a network. If you don't, you should start building a network. So that's the best way to get a job in any time, but especially in a time like this where it's more difficult for internships as well as full-time positions. And I would definitely start with open source projects. So picking something that you're interested in or technology that you want to learn about, and sharing as you go, as you learn that technology. So once you start learning about something, look for open source projects that relate to it. So like we could use Rod's example, right, of artificial intelligence and machine learning. He's interested in that. He starts learning about it, and then he looks for technologies that map to it and gets involved in it and meets people. That's building your network. And before you know it, when opportunities arise, he's asking which book. Yeah. You're already in position. So the book is called Developer Career Master Plan, and it's a book for people who want to advance their technical careers as developers. So that could be whether you're just getting into the field, coming out of university or being self-taught, or you're in a role already and you really want to take your career to the next level to advance to more senior levels. So that's a plan for how to do that and the things that you should do to kind of differentiate yourself from the everyday developer that you might see.
I'm actually going to put in a harder plug for the book because I have no vested interest in this. I think the book is truly excellent, and I think it does go through a lot of things around this. So yeah, I would recommend that. Another thing I would suggest, great comment, Dan. Yeah. Another thing I would suggest is identify an area that is new. And I mean, if I can just tell a story about things that happened before spring for me. I was originally a music academic. I had a computer science degree, but the computer science degree I had zero work experience in the late 90s. So how did I manage to fairly rapidly from 97, accelerate in terms of getting more senior jobs? Well, what I did was quite intentional.
Context, where were you?
I was in London at that time.
Okay, so the market there was what?
Oh, the market was reasonably healthy.
Yeah.
So the problem wasn't the market, the problem was me. The problem was that I had no experience whatsoever. In fact, so little experience outside university. I could write perfectly good code, but the first day on my first job, I discovered a concept called version control, which I never encountered. That was my level of knowledge of practical software.
Well, to be fair, it's unfortunately the case that for a long time you learned theoretical, not practical skills for some of your university time, and version control, maybe it just wasn't. Well, it's one of those things you can figure out later once you understood the basics and the theoretics.
Oh, I think that is really quite true. I mean, probably another thing that happened that week, the person who kind of educated me about version control, whom I was sitting next to, was trying to write a parser for a business kind of simple business rule thing. Very simple.
Terrence Parr?
No, it was not. And Paul did not know as much about parsers as Terrence does. So interestingly, although Paul taught me about the practicalities of version control, I was able to explain to Paul that there was a whole theory around writing parsers. And within 2 days, we implemented things that he thought would literally take months because I knew compiler theory. Right. So I think that the academic side, I actually don't think it's necessarily bad that computer science degrees are often theoretical, because those things, some of those things that I've learned, like compiler theory that I learned in my degree, have actually served me in good stead. Right. But anyway, if I can just come back to where I was going with this, which is how did I manage to be able to, fairly rapidly progress? Yeah. So one reason is I'm a pretty good coder, but I mean, there are plenty of pretty good coders. It was helpful, but it wasn't the sole reason. The biggest reason is I identified the right things to focus on. So I identified that if you looked at that time, there were more C++ jobs than Java jobs, but I was way more competitive at Java. So because, there was so few people out there with, So, that is for people who are looking to, take that first step in their career. I would strongly suggest that is an interesting thing. So for example, if you want to take the next step in Java at this point in time, I think open source, as Heather suggested, is an excellent idea. How would you think about what kind of open source? Well, maybe look at an area that's new. And I mean, maybe it's just because I'm personally obsessed with it. I think the AI area is pretty new in Java. There are projects like LangChain Java that are really quite interesting, Spring AI. I would actually seriously think of focusing at areas where the people who've got 10 or 15 years experience in Java are not going to massively outcompete you because they don't have 10 or 15 years more experience in something that's really new.
That's true. Yeah, a new thing. And it's the thing you're interested in too. That's the most important thing, is you follow your passion, what you're interested in. I mean, if you wanted to start really small in OpenJDK, there's obviously if you move versions, there's lots of dependencies. So there's open source libraries and things like that, that, maintainers need help with in order to stay up with the latest release. So that's something really small to start with. But yeah, obviously new trends in the technology where, you can come in and you have the time to spend learning it, and you can educate the more advanced developers and offer them something when you come in. I think that's really good advice. What were you going to say?
I was just touching on that idea that you espoused earlier, the idea that your background in academia served you well. And I think, and then it's also, you talked about a big fish, small pond, that whole notion. I think one super good example of both these things was when you and the team embraced AOP, that came from the hallowed halls of academia and theory, and productionized it. And I think in the same vein, if you can, and AI today is productionized academia, right? It's what we know today as being ChatGPT came from years and years of R&D and theoretics, and theoreticals. I just think that's a great idea. If you can find something kind of out there and take it to the masses, that might get you you could be a big fish in a small pond, a relatively unknown one, and there's a lot of upside.
Yeah. And I think in chapter 1 in the book, that's kind of one of the first things I talk about is learning to learn and just, getting into that mode of a growth mindset and picking the things, because it can be overwhelming too, especially if you're like, this question is right. Like there's so much, where do I start? That can be overwhelming. So developing a methodology and a framework for deciding what you want to learn and doing it at a pace that you can actually digest and then take it out and share with other people in the marketplace and in the community.
Also, I think try to be as objective as possible in assessing your strengths and weaknesses. So including things that are not inherent to you, but are how you sit in the job market. So for me, I was quite well aware that in the late 90s, I was extremely uncompetitive in terms of experience. In fact, anybody who looked at my resume wasn't going to hire me. I was actually a bit lucky that the first job that I got, the hiring manager was off sick. He was not technical. Had Chris been there, I don't think I'm quite sure he wouldn't have hired me. Instead, I was interviewed by 2 senior architects who weren't even in the part of the business I was working in. And they grilled me in great detail on things like deadly diamond inheritance problems, and they liked the answers. So they actually asked me nothing but like very technical questions, which I could answer. So, if you assess your strengths and weaknesses, you can look at what you can do to work around the experience problem. But you can also look at things like, for example, do you really like speaking? Do you really like writing? So, another thing that I had going for me is that I had a lot of experience of writing. I quite enjoy it. If that is the case, think about ways you can do that. You can potentially speak at meetups, but also you can contribute to open source projects in documentation. There are a lot of things that you can do that don't necessarily involve writing code.
Right. And there's writing too on social media. That's like one of the things. Well, obviously I think sharing is really important, because in my book, like that's a whole section apart, like multiple chapters about sharing. That could be just writing little things on social media and sharing what you know and helping to raise your visibility. But I think that's a really good point about focusing on your strengths. I'm really big into that. And I think I learned that lesson personally myself when I, first started out in tech, was like trying to make myself be more like the people around me. But when instead I just became more focused on what I'm good at and bringing those strengths to the community, I not only enjoyed my career more, but I started to advance more in my career. So I think Rod's advice is sound, that figure out what it is that you do really well and do more of that rather than trying to beat something that you're not.
Alexa, to speak to your question, hopefully some of this is useful. Big or small projects, I think you absolutely start small, start with pull requests. Start with, and it could be as simple as just correcting some documentation, just something that's useful and will be accepted. And don't try to force it. Like trying to do a big project is always going to be a little bit risky. So, I think do it incrementally, and hopefully you will feel your way towards something that's at the right level of granularity.
I agree. I actually have like 5 steps for doing this. I'll try to remember.
Is that the master plan?
Well, for the open source, like
you got more than 5 steps.
I have 5 steps for an open source project. I have 5 steps for getting involved in an open source project. And that basically is the first step is this: pick a project, right? And I talk about that, like how do you pick a project? I think we already covered that part.
Okay.
But the second part is like communicate with the lead. That something that you just said just reminded me of that. It's like, don't just go off and write the next new feature that this project should go implement, right? Like say, hey, introduce yourself on the mailing list or to the project lead and say what you're interested in, what your thoughts are, and ask them what they think of your ideas and how you could contribute, what would be useful to them. And then go and research like the latest things that have happened, like the latest issues, the latest things that have been discussed on the mailing list, and then come to an agreement together. And like you said, Rod, pick small things and actually do them. Like that's the next step. Like actually do what you said you're going to do, and then communicate about it and have fun, and then go back and start the process all over again. So like building on each other.
The picking small things, I think maybe is it fair to say you should have the communication before you do the thing?
I
and
mean,
then
I
do the
think
thing
it's
and
good.
then
Sometimes,
communicate that you've done it.
sometimes people don't know what they want help with. That's actually like the people who maintain that project list that I talk about in OpenJDK. I always encourage them to think of those things for first timers. Like, pick a couple issues that would be really good for someone who just wants to get involved in your project, and what could they go fix?
Right.
Sometimes they don't. They're just too busy. They haven't thought of anything. So I always think it's a good idea to research it and have at least a couple ideas. I know a lot of people will come with a big idea and be disappointed when it's ignored or rejected. But if you at least have a couple of suggestions of small things that you would like to contribute, that can be helpful. But maybe be willing to accept and surrender that might not be what the project lead wants. So be willing and open to accept, like, this is my idea, but what would help you? How can I be of service to you?
A lot of open source projects are pretty good now at identifying what they want, what issues they want people to pick up.
For first timers.
Yeah, okay, so
I was going to say, Spring and OpenJDK both have ideal for contribution tagged GitHub issues. So if you don't know what to contribute, let them tell you. And usually they're simple, like, at least certainly with the ones on the Spring team, it's not like we don't know how to solve these problems. It's just a function of time, but we're volunteering to mentor someone who wants to take it on. And it's an opportunity. Tell them that GitHub issue, and we'll get back to you and we'll help you through it. It's good for all of us.
I agree. And I think the other thing is feedback, right? So everything's open and developed in the open now. Even if you just download the latest and run it against your application.
I do it all the time. It's tedious, but it's very satisfying.
But then you can't just do that. You can't just download it and see what happens and then make your little fixes. You have to communicate. So that's why that fourth step of the things I was breaking down. You have to communicate. You have to share your feedback, because that's what makes the technology better. Not just you trying it and making your fixes and then keeping that to yourself and saying, maybe I did this, feel really good, make my product better, make my application better, make your project better. But what's going to make everything better in the end, the whole ecosystem, is to share what happened.
So asking for a friend,
asking for a friend.
The GitHub.com Spring projects, Spring dash projects. That's the universe of Spring, and then there's also GitHub.com/Spring /Spring dash cloud. I know where to go for those.
Okay.
But if I wanted to find the code and start, finding those issues and so on, where do I go for OpenJDK in that world?
Do you want to download the early access builds, or you want to find an open source project? Because it's two different things.
Yeah. Okay. Either.
Well, they're both really helpful. Easier to just go to jdk.java.net, download the early access builds. Yeah. So you can download, right now, Java 21 just came out, so you can download Java 22. You can download early access builds of Java 22.
Panama.
Huh?
Project Panama. It's in 22. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, so you can download right now early access Java 22, and that would be one of the things you could do. Then share your feedback. So download it, run it against your application. Yes, you can also download. Sometimes some of the projects have standalone early access builds just for the project, project specific.
Loom for years had that.
Yeah, right. And then on the other side, if you wanted to find one of those open source projects, when you go to OpenJDK, the website, on the left-hand side, there's projects, right? There's quality project, right?
Quality project?
Quality? Yeah, quality. It's alphabetical. Quality.
Oh.
So under quality, I'll explain how it relates to quality. You go in there, and then there's the list of the issues. It's called quality outreach. It's called quality outreach because if all the open source projects and dependencies that people have as they migrate in between different versions of Java, if all those open source projects are already being ready to be on the next version, so right now Java 22 is going to increase the quality of the whole release, and it's going to be easier for companies to migrate to the next version because you might have thousands of dependencies that aren't ready yet if you're using lots of different open source projects.
Quality, I get it now.
But yeah, and it's only open source projects there. So if it's not commercially backed, it's a community FOSS project, it would be listed there. So that's where you find those projects. That's why I said it's two different things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Either the platform, you're downloading it and getting, kind of learning about what's coming next in the new release and seeing how your applications are going to work with it, or kind of on the other side, looking for just open source projects that are dependencies in the Java ecosystem.
Another interesting thing about contributing to open source in general is, certainly in my experience, many open source projects, and I think Spring is no exception in this, the core engineers don't necessarily put that much effort into sample apps. And I mean, certainly this
Oh,
is
yeah.
true with, a lot of the projects I see out there, even in different languages. So, building a really beautiful sample app, taking one of the sample apps that's out there, that just making it so much better. Because if you look at any project that has traction, it's very likely that the core developers are really putting a ton of effort into the core. And it's not easy to, add something and transform it. Like, there's this person called Jürgen, and of course others, but Jürgen has been doing this. He's been doing this for 20 years, and he's kind of good. So, Spring Core is pretty good. There's not that much low-hanging fruit. Whereas if you look, for example, at areas that might be considered peripheral, like sample apps, they're not really peripheral in terms of how people come to the software. They're actually very important. And I think that can be a good way. Like if you contribute something that's absolutely awesome, because it may well be that you have better GUI skills than the developers. And I'm not just talking about Spring, I'm talking about lots of projects. This I think can be very valuable.
This is going to be a career limiting move, but can I Spring-splain you?
Because actually, I think it's required.
One of the, as you know, and have maybe forgotten, one of the biggest sample apps ever out there is the Pet Store, and we still maintain that. And that was written by Jürgen. And in fact, there's a whole GitHub organization called Pet Store.
I do know of Pet Store.
So what happened? There was Pet Clinic.
Pet Clinic, that's what I'm talking about.
Ours is Pet Clinic.
Pet Clinic.
Son's was Pet Store.
Oh, I forgot.
Okay, that's why I've heard of Pet
Ours
Store.
is the Pet Clinic.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then .NET copied that for a minute. That was horrible. Remember that? The Reddit when. Anyway, Pet Clinic. There's a whole org on GitHub.
So Pet Clinic, the original Pet Clinic was contributed in probably 2003, 2004 by somebody called Ken Krebs, who was doing exactly this. Like Ken really wanted to contribute to the Spring project. I don't remember the details. I think he may have been relatively new to Java at that point in time. And he did something that was really valuable.
Yeah.
And it lives.
A thousand flowers. Like I said, there's a whole org of them with like microservices and monolith and all these different permutations of it now. But the core code, you can see Jürgen's name. That's one of the reasons I love about Spring is I always tell people about this. You, Rod, wrote the book before the code.
Yes, which is unusual.
Very unusual. Most people write the project and they're like, oh, I better document it now. No, he wrote the book explaining the principles behind it. And the code sort of followed. And well, there was a lot of code at the time. It was hand in hand. But
I think that's
one begat the other.
That is unique about, I think, the Java ecosystem, though, that there is so much rich documentation, and that's actually a comment about documentation from Dan. And that's because in the Java ecosystem, really, it's required, right? Mm-hmm. And now, like Rod said, it goes hand in hand, right? Writing the specification and the documentation along with developing the code 100%. At the same time. And as someone's pointing out, right, that documentation is a great way to get involved and get started on a project. And I agree because a lot of times that's the least favorite thing for people to do, but it is required and people appreciate it. So the maintainers and the project leads will definitely appreciate you. And that's another thing, if you decide to read the Java specification, providing any feedback on any part of it is valuable because they don't receive much feedback on the specification.
Which is a shame because talk about something impactful. You get that wrong, it screws up everybody for decades.
Right. So make it better.
Yeah, make it much better, quick. Not that you could. It's very hard to improve upon Java. I'm just saying that is something.
Well, I mean, the more people who help, the more innovation that can go into the platform. So that affects the pace, right? How many people help with those kind of things.
Pace is already breakneck. I'm a big fan.
Well, no, but I mean, the pace is every 6 months, right? But more features can go in if there's more contributors coming from the community.
Yeah.
Which I think, by the way, is why we see more people contributing now that we have releases every 6 months is because it's like, oh, there's something new in sight. If I contribute something, if I say I'm going to work on some part of this project, I'm actually going to see the result of that in 6 months. I don't have to wait 3 or 4 years.
Which is empowering because
that's human nature. You want immediate gratification. Right?
I mean, certainly the Spring team and others, I'm sure, have we've had this nice dialogue, a nice open line with the JDK, with people working on the Java language and so on. Yeah. And it's just very powerful to know, hey, my feedback turned into something that became better for everybody just 6 months later, or in Spring Boot, 6 months. next week, by the way. Spring Boot 3.2 coming out next Thursday, Thanksgiving here in the US. I'm thankful for Boot, and you should be downloading it. It's got to come out GA, but that's all because of the feedback we got in these 6-month cycles. That's super true.
Right. So you had early access. Took advantage of that.
It takes a village to
worked kind of simultaneously along the process. Yes.
And also there's a what's it called?
Synergy?
Oh, I said it. I didn't mean to.
Synergy. I'm just thinking Silicon Valley.
I gotta leave.
I'm thinking about Russ
It was just
Hanneman,
appropriate.
remember?
We're not throwing out buzzwords. It's just appropriate use of the word at the time.
There's a synergy there in there's a synergy in the Java, the evolution of Java and the evolution of Spring. Right?
Yeah,
They go hand in hand.
it goes hand in hand. I agree.
Yeah,
Definitely.
So okay, tell us. What is the master plan?
The master plan.
This book is called Developer Career Master Plan. I'm not trying to give away the contents of the book. They should definitely go buy it.
Right.
Somebody was asking, where do you go buy it? I suspect
you buy it on Amazon. It's also, if you have a learning subscription on, what is that, O'Reilly?
Yeah.
You can get the ebook there.
And
if you have it, like if your company or your university has it's packed, right? Has it on their website.
PACT.
I think Amazon's the best place to get it.
This questioner was in Macedonia. That's the
Kindle store.
Yeah, I think you can get the ebook in Macedonia.
Yeah.
So you can get it in most parts of Europe and the US in a paperback format.
Double win. The ebook is usually cheaper.
In India, the ebook is cheaper.
They have smaller, cheaper versions in India usually. Which is good too.
They do.
Yeah, I do. My book is like whatever, $5 there versus marketing more else.
Oh, that's a good deal.
For that market,
So what's unique about the book, and I didn't really mention this, I said it has 3 parts. So the master plan is 3 parts, which is learn. So the first part of the book, it's 15 chapters. So maybe about 5 chapters are about learning and getting yourself into that mindset, like I talked about. And then the second part of the book is about sharing. So learning those skills of how to share and how to develop the skills that maybe you don't think you want to exercise as much as your coding skills that are definitely required. And then part 3 is about making an impact. So taking sharing to the next level and making an impact. And the thing that's unique about the book is that every single chapter has stories from real world developers about how they've implemented that technique or that skill in their careers and what's happened as a result of that. So like Rod was reading right before we started this, he was reading about Ed Burns, right?
Yep.
In his chapter, talking about standards, which was in part 3, right? So making an impact by getting involved in standards. And Ed has really fond memories of that helping his career. And so he was a perfect match. So it took a long time to really map people that I know in the community with each of those 15 chapters, but it did happen, and some of the chapters have more than one story or example, but each chapter has at least one, and that's really been the favorite thing in terms of what people share about the book. They love that.
Can I read the list of names?
Okay, sure. Read the list.
There's some amazing people. Rafael Del Niro. We've got Mala Gupta, of course, the legend. Ben Weiss, Barry Bird, Nikita Koslev, Helio Silva, Barry Bird, Scott Wiersham, Arun Gupta, okay, another legend, right? Scott Wiersham, is he there twice?
I think he is there twice because I mentioned him in one chapter, so I put his name there.
Tiago Bonfim, forgive me.
Bonfim,
okay.
Tiago Bonfim.
I did this to myself. I should have just said, go check out the table of contents.
No, go ahead, it's fun.
I'm now mispronouncing names left and right.
No,
People
are
ashamed of me. Nikita Koslev again, Edwin Dirks, Elder Moraes, okay, Rodrigo Graciano, Mary Grigleski, Trisha Gee, Ishel Ruiz, Josh Juno, Jim Weaver, A.N.M. Basler Rahman, Mimar Aslan, and Victor Grazi, Wellington Rosa, Ed Burns, and Yolande Poirier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Woo!
Anyway, just a who's who. I am not in the book. And that's my fault.
You were invited. So many people were invited, and I would have loved to include more people. But with the confines of the book, but I'm going to be doing more interviews that map to the book over the next year. Just sharing those maybe on my podcast.
It kind of worked out well though. I get to interview you in a roundabout way. So here we are.
But I love hearing stories. And really the reason why I started the book was because before the pandemic, I would get to go to conferences. And that was one of my favorite things was people coming up to me and asking for advice. And because they see so many people when they get involved with the programs that I've been involved with, their career just kind of takes off. So they wanted advice on what to do. And when I didn't have that conference interactive opportunity, I just was thinking of ways that I could share. And so that's how I put together a developer master plan. And when I was approached about writing the book, I invited Bruno Souza to write the book with me because he also has so much experience working with developers all over the world. And we really wanted to provide you the best of all the stories that we both heard over the course of our careers.
I'm struck by, Rod was saying this right before the show, and I am actually struck by just how much there is a lot, because it's when I think tech books, I think, half code, half explanation. This is just a pure, dense text book with just text. There's no code snippets.
Right, there's no code snippets in the book.
This is a lot. You're buying.
It's a career book, and so that was the thing. Is like there's lots of code books, right? And there's lots of career books, but are there lots of career books for developers on what they need to do to really get the most out of their career and be satisfied in their career? Because that's often what it is, right? You're doing a job. It's like, how do I advance? Or the only way to advance is maybe to go into management. Not everyone wants to go into management. So it really is a book about how to be a technical leader if you're not taking that track of going to the management track, but still being able to advance your career. So really focused on the developer and careers.
Yeah. I must say I am very impressed. I can't say I've read all of the book, but I've read as much of it as I've had time to in the last few days. And it's solid content. It's, I would expect in books about this kind of subject, there's often a lot of padding, and like this book is solid content, and it's kind of very practical and sensible, and it deals with a lot of issues in considerable detail. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it.
Yep, me too. No padding. We held the line. I had a vision for the book. I feel like we carried through on the vision. Like I said, I want to share more examples. That's really all I would add to it.
You're okay. If the book had just been Heather and Bruno espousing great ideas for 150 pages, or whatever this book,
310
pages, it feels it too. It's thin, but it's heavy. If it had just been the two of you, that in of itself would have been worth their purchase. But it's you two, and then all these other luminaries. I mean, you can't. That's an incredible compendium. Well done.
Thank you. I feel good about it. Really, the reason why I did it was so that other people can learn and enjoy their career more, be more fulfilled, and feel like they're making a difference.
Yeah, I'm good. So, the Java, I noticed that Bruno, he was the global director of the open worldwide Java community.
Java user group community.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was thinking about that.
In Brazil. Well, he was a leader for all of them, and he's also a leader in the Brazilian Java user group. So
Bruno had the flag, right?
Yes.
That was Bruno.
He still has the flag.
Yeah.
Actually, he's coming to San Francisco next week. So yeah, he'll be here next week.
Invite him over.
Yeah. So he'll be here Sunday, and
you still be that?
We're gonna do a little gathering on Monday.
I'm flying back on Sunday.
Rod will miss it. But yeah, and then
he's a good egg.
User groups are great ways, actually. So for the person who asked about careers, I would check out a user group in your area. So that's a great way to build your network and find out about job opportunities and maybe even projects that people are working on that you could help out with, or get ideas for things to learn about.
So my experience was exactly that. The Java user group was my vein for this community, right? So I was living in Phoenix, which is a place you can go when you want to be inside most of the day for most of the year. And anyway, I was there, and they have a really good Phoenix Java user group. I don't know if it's still good. I haven't been there.
Honestly, I've never been to the Phoenix Java user group. I should check it out.
It's phenomenal.
Phoenix is like the third largest city in the U.S.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been there, but I don't know the user group there.
I would go again, and I'd be happy to speak there again if they'd have me. But
shout out to Phoenix.
And they had, and I would go there every month dutifully, and I learned a ton. And James Ward was there, and then poor Keith Donald deigned to appear there, and of course I was like, I'm the guy that was at the end of the show saying, I've got these ideas, listen to me, which is, now I get those people to talk to me, and I'm like, oh, I get you, give me a hug, like we are the same now.
Yeah.
But then because of that visibility, somebody approached me from the server side.
Yes, awesome.
I gave a presentation there, and somebody said, hey, do you want to speak at the server side? I said, sure. I did a few of those, and eventually I bumped into you, and I literally pounced on you from behind a column and then kind of
You didn't scare him too
arm
much.
wrestled
You
him,
know,
and then
alarm him.
yeah, it was not great, but it worked. I gotta.
You convinced him you weren't crazy.
Or by being crazy, I'm sure that would have well. No, actually, that's another story. But I actually I went over my future boss to him, which is hysterical. Do you remember that?
Oh, you mean
You went
it
over-
would have went over Adam?
Poor
Adam.
Or
Yeah.
I don't think Adam minded.
Adam is the best.
Well, you got to
So,
sometimes
yeah.
go up the organization. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of the things I talk about is like
Yeah.
manage up and down and across. So like all across the organization. Sometimes you have to go up in order to like get that visibility as well as understand what are the priorities and what's the strategy.
Yeah.
You have to have a way to access that.
Adam would have gotten back to me. I would
He
soon
would
learn.
have. Yeah.
It's just that the guy had
Yeah.
more work down the
Yeah.
floor and out the door than any
Yeah.
person I've ever had the privilege of knowing since or before. Right?
Yeah.
The guy is
Yeah.
a machine, and I wasn't getting a response fast enough. It was like a month, and I think I would have gotten a response eventually. Now that I know him as well as I do, I know I would have gotten a response eventually. But I was in a bit of a deadline, so I approached him, and
you have to seize the opportunity, and you have to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. So I think the stories that I wanted Josh to share in the book, which he's going to share with me eventually, but I really have already heard them, but I haven't shared them with more people, is yes, the user groups, social media, obviously, and then that story you told me about, when you used to attend DevOps, but then the first time, you were invited to speak. So that's public speaking. That's another chapter. Josh would have been perfect for any of those chapters, but obviously, you're all here watching Josh's show, so he's a luminary, right? And there's three right there. 3 things right there, 3 of the chapters in the book. He incorporated those into his career, and it just shows, where you can go. If you just pick, you don't have to do all the things, just pick any of them, really.
Well, I think what, Josh has alluded to in Phoenix is that first step. Like, if you go to your local users group and meetups for whatever technology, that's definitely a valuable thing in itself in networking. But very often these chapters are struggling to find contact. In fact,
absolutely
all the time. And that's something I wish somebody had told me early on, that like you can often, it's just as simple as to say, I want to give a talk. And they're like, oh yes, please. I mean, obviously you do need to prepare it and know what you're talking about. So I gave, I think, my first tech talk.
I did the first part. I didn't know these last 2 parts. Oh,
my first.
You don't have to know everything now. That's important. Don't get intimidated by thinking you have to know everything. But
my first tech talk I had identified this as something I wanted to do because, again, remember when I talked about strengths and weaknesses? I knew I was a fairly good public speaker because I taught at a university for years, like in a different space, but like I had absolutely no
fear the skills,
of public speaking. So my first talk was in North Sydney. I happened to be living in Australia at the time, in I think 1998, and it was on JSP 0.91 or 0.92?
Oh.
I'm sure someone online can answer that.
Someone's seen
the
that
first
talk.
version of that. Well, no, I don't think anybody's seen this talk. I don't think it was video, but whatever that, it was the first version of the JSP spec that was put out there, and anybody was trying to use. In retrospect, it's quite funny that was my first tech talk because it was a truly bad version of something that was a truly horrible idea and was like massively abused for years. But, humble beginnings. That's where I gave my first tech talk about this truly terrible thing.
Okay. Well, there you go. So I think, the other thing is, I agree with what Rod just said, but also one of the great ways to give your first talk goes back to chapter 1, what I talked about, learning something new. So you can, as you're learning something new, think about how you would give a talk sharing your perspective of how you learned it. So that can not only give a unique perspective to maybe something that people have already heard a different talk on, but how did you learn it? What are some of your tips? And you're kind of like ingraining it more into your memory if, as you're learning something, you're thinking about how you're going to share it with your community. So that's a great talk to give.
Teaching is
a Java
road
user.
to mastery.
Yeah.
Can I, awkward digression here, can I just read aloud? Enter into the record your table of contents here.
Okay.
Just because
share the highlights.
I feel like this conversation is super good.
Okay.
But it's unwieldy, and I want to make sure we get.
Okay.
I want people to understand that this book is something they should be have in their bookshelves. It makes a great stocking stuffer. It's the holiday season.
It's paperback. You can fold it.
Is
Yeah.
it? Does it? Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you roll it into a stocking.
That's great. Okay.
I love stockings. If I don't get a stocking, I'm really disappointed.
So is this my Christmas gift?
It is.
Because I get
It's
to
at
keep this, right?
Christmas
You're going to have to put it in
I
your
brought it for
stocking
you.
yourself, though.
I brought it
I
for
can do
you.
that. I'll put it
It's
under the tree.
yours.
I don't even. It's not even
It's
just a stocking
yours.
stuffer. That's stockings are where we keep the apples and the dental floss that you get.
Mhm.
Okay, so the secret. Do you do that for your kids, by the way? Do you, like, my mom gave me like apples and floss and stuff. The stockings were like the stuff you needed.
You
but not
have to
necessarily
put
the
a
stuff you wanted.
fruit in the very
You mean,
bottom.
like
You
dental
have to
floss?
put fruit.
Yeah.
I
Like,
never
well-
gave floss, but either an apple or an orange in the bottom of the stocking
Right.
really gives it shape.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just saying to Josh and Heather, I have a very severe toothache at the moment.
Oh dear.
Your mother loved you, Josh.
Yes.
I think I now see, right now, I see the love.
Oh, very much
Yeah.
so. Oh, poor guy.
Aw.
Okay, so table of contents. Here, let me just get through this quickly.
Okay.
The secret to learning about technology quickly and continuously. That's the chapter name, by the way, folks, if you're confused about these random utterances. Chapter 2, choose your best path for learning, training, and certifications. Interesting, by the way. I have thoughts on this because I am technically a Sun certified Java programmer.
Yeah.
And anyway, optimize your support network for growth. That's chapter 3. Acquire the right skills deliberately. I could have used that advice every day. Stepping outside your comfort zone. It doesn't. I have no shame. There's no comfort zone. Become a team player by embracing communities. Focus your growth by giving and receiving mentoring. Oh, that's profound. I like that one.
Right. Mentoring's key. Yeah.
Be a part of a larger group, meeting people at user groups and meetups. Hey, that's the one I think we
covered that one.
not nearly so well as in the chapter.
That's true.
Grow your network through social media. Build lasting relationships. Yeah, okay. The fact that we're all sat here is sort of that. Build trust and solve problems with open source projects. Okay, ditto. Likewise. Scaling trust through public engagement, speaking, and blogs. Okay, yeah, with you. Be a leader, manage up, down, and across the organization. I quite like that, and I quite like. Did you see Kelsey's amazing excretion? Oh, hey, you're thumbs upping, or am I doing it? I'm not sure.
Oh, I think it just must
does it
have been.
We got a comment.
Okay, it's reading.
Reaction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kelsey had a great excretion about this. Something.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure what you're supposed to call people what they do on X. I think I'm just calling it an excretion.
Post.
Anyway, yeah, whatever. So and then stepping up your technology game, defining technology instead of merely using it, build your personal brand and become a trusted advisor. So in a book about software developer careers, friends, notice that very sparse few chapters have anything to do with building more software, and they have everything to do with the stuff, the ambient sort of satellite stuff, the people, the process, the communities, right. If you want to grow your career trajectory,
it's gonna make you stand out, right? I mean, it's kind of like understood. So if you're developing, you have to obviously have some technical skills, but what else?
That's
so
table
it's everything
stakes.
else. It's everything else, as well
Exactly.
as how to pick the new technologies to learn, so that you're always growing and evolving, but at the same time you're not getting burnout, and that overwhelmed, which is a thing that happens, especially to newcomers or students. I get that question a lot when I'm speaking to students. Well, they're overwhelmed with how to pick the right thing, and how there's so much to learn, and they feel like they have to learn everything. And so the book kind of gives some guidance on how to select things, and Rod shared some things.
if you're not overwhelmed, I'm overwhelmed, and I'm not a student anymore.
Right, but there's just a framework
geez.
for making that work and sustainable, right? So you can have a career that lasts over time.
Yeah.
Also, I would recommend, if you're picking things, if you're obviously not, many of us are in situations where we don't get to pick on a daily basis because we're working with existing technologies or whatever needs to be done. But when you've got the opportunity to make choices, consider what is well suited to your strengths and weaknesses, but also consider what you enjoy, because there is something that makes it profoundly easier to work on something that you believe in, that you enjoy. And there always will be differences when you look across different things. There's there are plenty of things in software that are exciting to me. There are plenty of things that are not exciting to me. And I both have a lot more fun, probably do a better job when I focus on the things that I enjoy.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm fully aware that this is kind of a nice to have, and many people are not in the position to choose. But whatever you can do to, align what you're doing with things that you're more naturally interested in will make your life happier and make you better at what you're doing.
Did you ever read that book, Drive, by Daniel H. Pink?
I've heard that book, but I didn't read
it. It posits that people that feel, because it asks the question, what is the engine of drive that motivates people to work without pecuniary remuneration on things like open source projects, when they're why? What is the intrinsic value of working on open source when you could be earning a paycheck doing something else? And it's like it basically there's Drive 1.0, which is like perpetuate the species, eat, all these other carnal things. Drive 2.0 is carrot and stick. So if you want to incentivize something in your populace, then you tax. If you want, you make it cheap. You take away, you give them rebates and all that stuff. If you want to disincentivize it, you tax it, like alcohol. You disincentivize that. And Drive 3.0 is, what is that? Why do people work on open source, which promises no money, not even necessarily notoriety, and yet somehow people are willing to commit to that? And it basically, the book says at some point there's a number after which, if you've got enough money in your bank account and your bills are paid, you're not going to starve. As long as you're not going to starve and you're not going to be on the streets or whatever. After that, there's a certain number where extra money doesn't really motivate you anymore. Right? There's whatever that threshold is for you. It's different per locale and whatever. And then it says, in fact, so what is the question? The question is, what does motivate you? And it gives an example of Zappos. Zappos is the shoe online e-tailer, and that company had they sold shoes online, which is a very intimate thing. And of course, people aren't going to do that lightly if they feel like there's going to be harangued when they call customer support. Right? If I buy a pair of shoes without walking in them, and I put them on and I don't like them and I can't return them, why would I ever do that, right? So Zappos had this great insight, which is we need to make the call centers legendary. Okay, how do you do that? And they realized that most people that work at call centers at the time were very sort of sorely demotivated, right? They worked in a call center, loud, hectic. They had to be there at odd hours. People were yelling at them. They had to read the script and follow the script and push the script. They were very disincentivized. And Zappos had a different formula. They said, look, people can do this from their kitchen table when they're watching their kids. They don't need to be in our call center. They can. It's the gig economy, the original gig economy. They can log on whenever they want, right? They can do it before they drop off their kids and maybe during kids at school, and they have to log off, and that's fine. They can do it 5 hours a day or 12 or whatever they want, right? And also, they can control how they solve the problem. They can talk to the customer and say, hey, the customer's upset. Okay, fine. You want to talk about the sports, or I can give you a refund right now. No questions asked. You have full autonomy over how you solve the problem. And so these three things let people feel like they're invested in the solution, as opposed to they're just following orders like a drone and a robot in a factory or something. And that I think, to Rod's point, if you can find something that gives you those three dimensions, the control over what task you're doing, the time in which you're doing it, and the technique that you use to do it, you'll have a higher purpose, as long as your basic monthly sort of nut is met, of course. You have food in your belly and your kids aren't without shoes,
Right.
It's hard to do that, but strive for that. Aim for that. Find the thing that meets those three things, and you'll never be sad. If you're happy with what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life. That thing,
That's true.
I think that's true.
And I mean, there are some people that don't want to do open source projects. That's the thing about that list you just read off, right? You don't have to do everything, but at least if you can pick some things that you think you could start with or try and see what happens, right? See what you can fit into your career, and see, like, open source and public speaking are great because you get so many different things as a result of them. Like, some people times they ask me, like, if you had to pick one thing out of the chapters that you did in the book, like, which one would you pick?
Yeah, which one would you pick?
And I think public speaking is the one that I would pick. And even though I'm actually an introvert, you probably won't believe that, but I am an introvert. And so, what I discovered was I could become good at this, and that would provide benefits in my career. It would help me with my network. It would help me with my visibility. It would help me to learn new things, right?
Sure.
So,
I mean,
I think you even find mentors that way. I mean, mentoring is one of those topics that can be kind of awkward, right? So you can kind of informally meet people through doing public speaking, and ask them questions, or people ask you questions, and kind of becomes that reciprocal type relationship. Because in mentoring, both the mentor and the mentee benefit, right? It's not just one or the other. So public speaking really provides that opportunity for you to, not only network, but find potential mentors or mentees.
Talking about mentoring and community, one thing that I think really is quite important is karma. Back in my very early days when I wanted to get from music to software, I asked some friends of friends who were in the software industry for advice. Several of them were not helpful at all. And I remember thinking, if I'm ever successful in this career, if somebody asks me for help, I'm going to do my best to help them. And I really do think I followed up on that. So, karma really matters. Even when you're the person who's, gradually climbing and you may not think you have something to give back, potentially you do. And a good example of this happened in spring and was quite wonderful to see. So I think one of the things I was quite proud about with spring is we really were a pretty well-behaved community. Like in those days, nobody had a code of conduct or anything, but we had zero problems. I think there was one person we banned from the forums, but broadly speaking, because the core developers were respectful and helpful when they answered questions, you very swiftly got a cohort of people who came up, and it's like, well, Rod or Colin or Jurgen or Keith answered a question for me. Here's a question. I'm not going to make one of them answer it because I know the answer, so I'm going to answer it for that person. And in fact, that not only worked well in terms of the community, but it affected people's careers. So, for Example, Costin Lau, whom I had lunch with a few days ago, awesome developer, was a core Spring developer, has been at Elastic for quite a number of years. So now a really senior person, really successful, brilliant guy. Costin was, at the time that we decided he was, I think at the time he was living in Latvia. We were actually going to fly him out to a conference in Belgium to interview him. And we decided to do that because he was #1 poster in the Spring forums at that time. And, he was just awesome. But, I think it's a perfect example of how originally he obviously felt he'd been helped and he wanted to give back. And it ended up probably gradually, without him having a master plan, making him a very successful software engineer.
He was on the Spring team probably close to a decade, and he's been at Elastic for more than a decade now. I mean, Costin's a superstar, and he's one of those. He's like Jurgen. If you ask him a question, he's very kind, but he's not out there like I'm. Like there's a ratio of style, substance to style, and I'm mostly style with very little substance. Jurgen is mostly substance with some style. He can be, and I think Costin's that as well. He's just 100% good stuff, but he's not loud. He's not pompous. I don't know. He's just not he's just a quiet mouse, but he's just amazing. He's a mighty mouse. That's what I'm trying to say. The guy is so overwhelmingly awesome. Yeah.
But I think it was, in this case, it was someone who wanted to give back. And ultimately, I'm sure it wasn't his intention at the time, but, ultimately it did put him on a different trajectory in his career that has really taken him to a different level.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, well, the same thing, right? I mean, do you remember Manuel Jordan?
I do, yes.
Yeah, he was another one of those people where I'm just like, I love that there's somebody out there that cares so much about our community that they go to the extent that before we had Stack Overflow, if our bulletin board had a point system or a karma system like Stack Overflow, his would have been like 50 billion. Like it was just absurd how much that person gave back to the community. I just love that.
I think I agree. And I think another thing about certain people that you remember a lot and think kindly on are people that have those skills, that communication and collaboration skills in addition to technical skills. I think that's one of the other key things that we didn't really highlight. If we were going to highlight one more thing, that is covered in, I think, in chapter 4. We talk with Arun Gupta. You mentioned Arun. Yeah, it talks about those skills, right? Like, and sometimes people don't know what skills to develop, right? They think they should just learn more technologies, but actually, if you spend some time developing some of the skills that your stories were just highlighting, right? Collaboration with the community, communicating with each other, sharing things like critical thinking. Those are skills that you can't learn in isolation. You learn them by working with other humans. You practice them. You become a better communicator. You become better at collaborating with people, whether they're inside your company or they're at a conference or they're across the globe. I mean, now so many teams are distributed teams or hybrid teams, right? And those skills become even more important. So even if you got into technology and learned how to code thinking that you weren't going to have to interact with other people, you need to look at some ways that you can develop those skills, because hiring managers would much rather hire the developer who has those skills, even if they have maybe a lower level of the technical skills. If two candidates are vying for a position and one is just the highest technical candidate, right, has all the skills, excellent, and really, not really pleasant, doesn't have a great demeanor, doesn't really like to communicate or collaborate with other people, and then you have this other candidate, maybe his skills not quite as good as the other candidate, but they communicate with others. They have a track record of being collaborative. Like they share things in the community. They're working on an open source project, or they're a speaker, or they have, social media presence. Most hiring managers in the current era are going to pick the candidate that has maybe not as great technical skills, but has the ability to work well with other people.
When at Pivotal, we had the for every new candidate that wanted to work at Pivotal Labs, there was a pair programming interview. And the whole point was it was on paper, superficially, if you just squint at it, it was a whiteboard algorithm test, but it wasn't. We didn't actually care. We just wanted to know how well you worked with the interviewer to sort of arrive at the right results, because you're doing it together, you're pairing, right? And it was, if you can collaborate, anything's possible, and being able to sort of tease out the right answer through collaboration, that's so important. And I also think, going back to Spring for a second, and OpenJDK too, I'm sure, I haven't had the privilege of contributing because I don't need to, because it's perfect. But going back to my experiences with Spring, I contributed to some open source projects, and it I always felt like I was just there's some projects where I felt like I was one person plugging a hole that any other person on that project could have plugged. Okay. But on the other hand, when some of my first interactions with the Spring projects were like with Mark Fisher or Dave Steyer, right? These are not people that are the same. We are not the same. There's no galaxy in which those names and I are the same, right? They are just the fact that they deigned to take time to acknowledge my message was beyond my wildest dreams. And so that is, imagine getting Jürgen Holler to guide you through a process, to sit there and get somebody like him. You couldn't pay to get somebody like him to mentor you, but if you submit to his project and make a meaningful effort or a demonstrable effort, people like that will come out and help you get better at your craft. And it's just free. You can't. There's no college. Jürgen doesn't teach.
Right.
There's no. He could. I mean, he could be anything he wants, of course, but you get access to these amazing people, and that's the same thing in the OpenJDK. These are people that are doing things that only a handful of people on the planet understand.
Right.
You just imagine.
I mean, we're just talking about the two communities we're familiar with, right? But it could be any community, right? It translates to any technology, and even really the things in the book, if you apply them to any career, it would work. It's just that the examples in the book are developers applying them to their career, but they're things that really translate to any career.
I forgot to quick plug for myself.
Yes.
I'm doing a thing with Arun Gupta. I'm doing a webinar of some sort.
Okay.
I'll have details on that, but stay tuned. I forgot about that.
It's probably a LinkedIn Live. I was on his LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Live.
that sounds good, right? Yeah, it's gonna be one of those. And
I was on it at LinkedIn Live. I think about a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
I did it. It was fun.
Arwen's a good egg.
Yeah.
So the collaboration I think is super, super important. Actually, you're right, and that's.
It's in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you can't collaborate, you're going to be really limited in your career, honestly.
Or even worse, you'll be set back. I know some people that I would go out of my way to make sure never got a job in an organization if I was there, if they approached, because I know how just miserable they can be.
Yeah.
There are some people that I would just, no way. I'd rather leave than deal with them again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a history, and this is another piece of advice. I'm not sure if this is in the book, so tell me if it's in the book.
I'll tell you.
So, take more of an interest in business. I think that, even if you have no interest as a developer in starting a business, I do actually think that thinking a little bit about business is useful, and also do it in a context of humility. Like, I know from experience that anybody who runs a software company will get emails from engineers explaining why everyone in sales is a moron, and all our marketing is wrong. And obviously those things are not true. So, and what it does reflect is that there is, in many engineers, and I mean, I think everybody who's a good engineer has felt this at times, but we need to fight it. This kind of sense of arrogance that we're the smart people and these salespeople or marketing people, they don't get it, only we get it.
I'm a marketing person, technically.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything against marketing. But, I think it is one of the important learnings for me is, I don't think, look, I probably can't help having an ego in other ways, so I'm not going to say that I don't sometimes suffer from arrogance. I don't think that was the kind of arrogance that I had. But nevertheless, over time, I realized more the skills that people in marketing and sales have that most engineers don't have. So, I would encourage people to think about business, but don't do it in a bad way. Don't do it in the way where you think about it for long enough to conclude that everyone in sales and marketing is totally wrong and you've got the answers from first principles. I mean, you may have some good ideas, but the fact is there are also skills there that it's quite likely you don't understand. And reflecting on what those skills are, why many of those people are successful at their jobs, is actually potentially really quite useful.
100%. Making sure I'm not missing any questions and stuff.
Any questions or comments? Any last questions? I think we're ready to wrap it up after we take the last questions. So if anyone has questions, we can address them.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah,
that's a great, good fun. What a privilege to get you two, of all people, to sort of suffer these the us lowers. I appreciate it. I'm just so privileged to see you all here.
Well, thanks for having us on your podcast live stream. It was fun.
This technology stuff. It's good stuff. Okay. First question: are you on the internet? Both of you.
Am I on the internet? I am on the internet.
And do you want to be found?
Almost all the time.
And do you want to be found?
I can be found. I can be found on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Twitter, Heather VC.
Ramnivas.
Hey, Ramnivas.
Oh, buddy. Hi, bud. Good to see you.
I was talking to a mutual friend about you the other day.
And we were talking about AOP today, just now.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to get him in the studio as well. I think that would be great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's
Old
it.
Friend of ours.
I said it, right?
So LinkedIn.
On Twitter or X, Heather VC, LinkedIn, just Heather VanCura, and Rod.
I am Spring Rod on Twitter or X or whatever it's currently called.
Right.
I must admit I don't use it very much, and I'm
happy for it.
I would be happier to feel happier about using it, but I'm still there. So and realistically, I probably will start using it more. I'm also on LinkedIn.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. This has been fun.
It was fun. Thanks for hosting us, Josh, and letting us see your beautiful view.
You're always welcome.
Sharing about the book. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. So, just for those who just joined, developer career Master Plan by Heather VanCura and Bruno Souza.
That's right.
Get your copy. This is a good
Available
Get your
from
copy
all
on
good bookstores.
Amazon.
Yes.
On Amazon, at least.
Wherever
It might not
fun-
be in your local bookstore because it is very specific
But it's
to
good.
developers. So
Right.
yes, it is. It is. You know, it's quite a bit of knowledge in there. Lots of stories. So
Just
I hope you enjoy it.
legendary. All right, everybody. Have a
Okay. Thank
Happy
you for
holidays.
listening.
Thank
somebody
you.
hit end stream for me, would you?
And stream.
Press the boot.
Hit it.
Yep. And we gotta do it again for some reason.
Hit it
Gotta
twice.
confirm